Now, conversely, John Michael Schmitz is a Senior Bowl invite.
Mm-hmm.
He is the second guy that we're talking about on today's show from Minnesota. You were telling me beforehand that measurement-wise, very similar players.
Yes.
Now, what gets very odd here, and I don't want to waste time on the politics of the All-Star Game invites and who got what invite and who did not. I think that there is a bit of a big difference between both of these guys as a prospect. I watch John Michael Schmitz, and I get a lot of similar shades to what Stromberg brings to the table, which is being an experienced player, being very technically sound, consistent, but he is not the same level of athlete. And I have a lot of concerns with his upper body strength because there were a number of times where I'm watching him getting popped back. Mm-hmm. He's not a guy who's going to win and excel in hand fighting situations or will finish off reps with his upper body because he lacks that strength. That to me is an issue for him as a player. And I think I'm going to be lower on him than most because of those upper body strength concerns.
Yeah, so, I mean, the first note that you said, Joe, that I just want to allude to real quick is that him and Stromberg are almost exactly the same size based on preseason measurements. 6'4", right around John Michael Schmitz, 315, 9 3/4 inch hands, so almost 10 inch hands. He's got 32 3/8 inch arms, so right there at 32 and a half, 6'7" wingspan. Going to be 24 years old during draft time, which, at center, at offensive line, I'm not really too worried about the age thing, but just something to note, obviously. For me, Joe, I think that he is, and he's a 4-year starter, right? So this makes sense. I think he is just about as consistent a football player as you are going to find in this draft. I think the angles are consistently superb. I think foot quickness is good enough. I think that he can work in an outside zone scheme, and he does enough to attack proper leverage and be able to get his body into proper positioning. I think he does all those things well. I will agree. Between him and Stromberg, I think Stromberg is the better athlete. I don't think John Michael Schmitz is a bad athlete, though. I just think that he's not quite as good, right? He's a good, solid athlete at the center position. It's good.
He's not explosive. He's not you're not going to watch him and go, wow, but at the same time, You're not going to watch him and say, wow, this guy can't move.
Right, exactly. He's more of a, it's a good comparison because Stromberg explodes out of his stance when he's able to get when nobody's covering him, right? And he just works the second level. Michael Schmitz is more a smooth athlete. Can we agree on that, right? He's not explosive, but he's smooth. He gets to his spot and he gets to it well. And he understands how to attack leverage, which I think is great. I think he does have pretty good hands. But there is a strength development that does need to happen. I agree with you 100% on there. I think his lower body's pretty strong. He can kind of get his butt down, sink, and anchor pretty well. But I do think when he's caught hand fighting with players at times, he kind of hit and replace, that he does have a little bit of a tough time to really establish that inside leverage and be able to work with his upper body. So I think that those concerns are there. For me, before the season, I said that I think this kid's a 3rd to 4th round draft pick. And I think that he has upside. And if you're a 3rd to 4th round draft pick for me, at least in a vacuum, that's me saying he's probably a backup in his first year initially, but then he gets in a proper situation and then he's a starter long term. And I think that's what John Michael Schmitz is to me. I think that he's a player that's in the right system, in the right situation, could be a solid to good starting center in the NFL. I don't see anything superlative. I don't see a massive upside, but I see a good solid center in the NFL.
I'm in the same boat with you for his projection. I don't see a guy who is going to excel. This isn't a Pro Bowl center. This is somebody who still needs development in his upper body strength. And at the same time, it's easy to sit here and say a guy needs to improve his play strength. Does he actually make those improvements? And does he make it at a rate that will help him exceed the expectations? Mm-hmm. More often than not, that usually isn't the case. A lot of times because it's a really difficult process and it takes multiple off seasons to build up that strength to be a more dominant player. So those concerns to me are lingering. I still stick with what I said during summer scouting because I don't see much change from what we watched in summer scouting because we said the same exact thing. We said consistent, smooth player. You put him in, he's going to start. He'll get the job done. He's not going to exceed. He's probably not going to have absolutely, bottomless lows where you're going to have to, cut him or replace him at a certain point. I see him as being a bottom 15 center in the NFL as a starter for a period of time. That's the expectation for him. Not amazing, not bad. So for me, I gave him a 3rd, 4th round grade similar to you. There's
Yeah.
not much difference here with these two guys.
I,
Excuse me, with these two guys.
I will say this though, I do think that John Michael Schmitz is still valuable though, Joe, because I mean, there's some bad centers starting the NFL right now, man. Like, there's some
Yes.
bad ones right now, brother. Like, I mean, there's a lot of guys. I mean, and that's a fortunate but unfortunate thing for a guy like a John Michael Schmitz is that he might get drafted to a team that says you're better than what we currently have, right? Like, I'm a LA Rams fan, and I can't watch Brian Allen play center anymore. Like, I just can't do it. You're a New York Giants fan. Is Nick Gates still the starting center? I don't even know who the starting center is for the Giants.
Oh man,
anymore.
I don't even know because I think they've swapped a couple guys in and out.
I mean, it's just, and this is a whole offensive line issue in the NFL right now. This isn't just a center issue, but there's just not there's not enough good offensive linemen in the NFL. So this type of kid, the ability to come in and compete, I think early on is going to be good for him. But I do think that landing in the right situation is going to be very beneficial to him because, I mean, couldn't you see him getting dropped into this is the one thing about Creed Humphrey that we talked about, right? Kansas City Chiefs was a perfect situation for him, though. It was a perfect situation. You have the best quarterback in the world behind you. You have some good players around you as well. I mean, Creed Humphrey's a really good football player, but he also landed into a very advantageous situation to be successful. And I think that's what John Michael Schmitz needs. Again, I'm not comparing him. I mean, because I have a third or the fourth round grade on John Michael Schmitz. I had a second round grade on Creed Humphrey. So I do value Creed higher in a vacuum than I do John Michael Schmitz coming out. It's just my point is, though, is that especially at center, what's working around you can be very important and beneficial to you, especially early on. So being able to drop into maybe a veteran-laden offensive line where you might be the missing piece of consistency for the offensive line, I think that could be big and beneficial for John Michael Schmitz, who I do think is a pretty scheme-versatile player, right? Like, I think the movement skills are good enough. I think the power profile, at least from a lower body perspective, is good enough where he can play in his zone scheme. He can play in a man-blocking scheme. I really do like him. It's just, I think that there is a cap to how good he is. I don't think that he's that Pro Bowl level player in a vacuum.
I, for whatever reason, think, and you kind of said this, that a center-hungry team, I don't know why, but he feels like a guy that could sneak into the end of the first round because a team really needs a center, and we see it every year where like teams make their evaluations based on floor rather than projection. Like he just feels so much like a floor guy,
Like
that
safe,
like high floor. So a team's like, well, we don't want to risk another guy, but we want, say Strongberg is off the board. They just want like a safe player that steps in. If Cole Strange could unexpectedly go where he went, I think it's possible. Like I think it's definitely possible for him to sneak in that earlier, maybe early second round for a team that just really badly needs a center.
I can buy a second round with him. First, I'm out, but I think second round that is very possible. I mean, because one thing that we haven't talked about, Joe, and I mean, I think John Michael Schmitz and Ricky Stromberg could both play guard in a pinch, right? Like I wouldn't say they're both like just centers, right? Like strictly centers, but for the center class right now, there's a lot of question marks, man. Like I thought it was going to be really good going into the year. But then I feel like some guys didn't take a massive step forward that you anticipated. I mean, after Stromberg, for me, it's like there's kind of a bucket of John Michael Schmitz and Jared Patterson and Alex Forsythe and Oluwatimi from Michigan is a guy that I know some people like. Like there's a lot of guys, but I don't think there's any definitive pecking order for the center position right now. So all that to say is that I believe that you may be right in the sense that he maybe gets overdrafted because there's a need and there's not a clear-cut second, third, fourth option at center. Like I just think there's a very middling group that you still have to figure out where kind of the pecking order for that group is.
Yeah, somebody will definitely value him way higher than everyone else does, and that's kind of my point. But
yes, I mean, just a quick note is that Joe Tittman from Wisconsin's a guy that already declared for the draft. Luke Whippler, Ohio State, I think is a player that we both liked in the summer, and he's a guy that apparently is wrestling with the idea to declare early as well. So, how much do players like that, I guess, change the pecking order is going to be another thing to kind of keep eyes on moving forward.
Yeah, we are going to spend the entire cycle. It's early. The season for the NFL hasn't even ended yet, so we don't even know what the draft order is going to be. But we're going to start spending more and more time breaking down and figuring out what the pecking order is going to be. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out. At Joe DeLeone at Rise and Draft. Also, make sure you head on over to Bet Online, which is our presenting sponsor. Best place to place your bets, betonline.ag. Use promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Again, that is betonline.ag. Folks, thanks for tuning in. We'll be back with more prospect breakdowns throughout the cycle, so make sure you're tuned in.